Howdy, folks, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for the 28th of March, Friday, the 28th of March. I am off to Niagara Falls, Toronto and Niagara Falls today for Provincial House of Bishops, followed by House of Bishops, and then back next Friday to go up to Thompson, Manitoba for our DCAF meeting, our Diocesan Council of Aboriginal Affairs, and then over to Woboden for a church service, and then back to Thompson for Sunday morning for worship, and then down to Grand Rapids for a Eucharist and lots of confirmations. And then on Monday I will be in Sapatoyak for a conversation with parishioners there, and come back from the PA on Tuesday. So things are going to be nuts this next week and a half. So you're not going to see me again on Church at Home until Wednesday, the 8th or 9th, whatever the Wednesday is. I'll be back that day. But today I wanted to have a conversation with you a little bit about leadership and submitting to leadership. Considering considering the work of Christian nationalism over the last year or a little bit, and the amount of talk has been about the role of women, the church is kind of getting hit like blindsided by a big mega-sized bus that's talking about having people talk about, what is it to submit to leadership, and especially for women. And I have a bigger question. What is it to be submitting to leadership for Christians? Let's start with the women thing. Back when I got married in 2005, I was a clergy person. I was a female priest, and I wasn't married yet. And the female clergy in my diocese threw me a lovely wedding shower. And there were people who got mad because I was going to change my last name when I got married from Walker to Parker. Um, I didn't understand what the problem was, hence I was willing to do that. And it was a decision I made. It wasn't because I was told I had to. It was a decision I made. But one of the things that Rob and I talked about before we got married was who speaks for us. And biblically, it does state that, the woman will submit to the husband, and then the husband gets to, be the head of the house. But it also, people don't go on to say that the husband will submit to Christ, and as Christ exerts leadership with the husband, so the husband will with the wife. And that's, for some people, it's a really difficult thing to challenge, to hand on to, especially when people forget the Christ part. They just, or do the quote, the part that talks about women will submit to their husbands. Because Rob and I had this conversation about who would speak for us as a couple. And I was like, you can, no big deal. Some of it's because I'm not really interested in conflict. And I had a feeling that given our two families, there would be lots of challenges, lots of things that we would, be called upon to say or make a decision about. And that wasn't 100% of the time. It's not like every time we'd have a decision, I would go to Rob and say, okay, you be the one who says it out loud. It was more about, realistically speaking, if it was in my family's house, in the Walker side of the house, would be like, I'll answer. If it was in the Parkers, he would answer, no big deal. It was, who had the most information, who was answering the phone for the question. But we had this discussion, and a lot of people gave us both blowback about this, because what they didn't understand is that, they knew both of us. We're very strong-minded individuals. We have different opinions about things. But the fact is that a house divided cannot stand. And we learned that, we knew that before we got married. If we cannot come to some kind of agreement about something, of how we're going to do something, how we're going to approach a problem, how we're going to resolve a problem, then the problems will just keep on growing. And so we had this good conversation probably before we even got engaged, to talk about how do we handle these things. And the fact is that our agreement was we would handle them in our own home, behind closed doors, just the two of us. And when we came up with our resolution, whether it was Rob's idea in the first place or my idea in the first place, the other person, once we came to that consensus, we figured out what would be best for us as a couple, because there's lots of times when a decision's only about one or the other of us. It's okay, you go ahead and make that decision. But when it's about our home, about our household, about us as a couple, we need to speak with one voice. And if both of us are speaking at the same time, who's listening? People will be confused. If I say black, he says white. If I say up, he says down. And we're both speaking with authority. Who will the people we're speaking to look to say, okay, which answer is it? So we made the decision that we would figure black or white, up or down, or whatever it might be, and that Rob would just be the person who spoke for us. And that was not about some kind of, I'm a woman, I put myself under his authority, but very much about the fact that I am a faithful, believing, trusting woman who loves her husband and trusts that he loves Jesus, and he will do as is asked, that as Christ loves Rob, Rob will love me, and vice versa. As Rob loves me, he will love Christ. And hence, those relationships don't get bound up. It's more just a decision within our household to say, this is how we're going to do stuff. Now, I have a position of authority that's different than being a wife in a couple relationship, which is equal. He does not get his way more than I get mine. We work things like that out. But I am also then, in my world, separate from that. So in my world, I'm a bishop in my work world, in my vocational world. And while I might have a conversation with him and say, hey, what's your opinion? Or what do you think of this? Or, this is what we're going to do. And he feels free to share what his opinion is or his ideas. And quite often he'll bring something to me that I hadn't thought of. It's like, okay, yeah, oh, perfect. The same way as I ask my archdeacon or my dean or a congregation member or the receptionist or someone else, my financial person, I'll go to other people and say, okay, here's the thing I'm thinking about. At the end of the day, it's my decision to make, but I need to make an informed decision. And so I'm asking you to help me have all the information. And then pray for me as I make that decision. Because I am the one who, in this case, is exhibiting or has the role of leadership. And I need people to submit to that leadership, and I want that leadership to be understood to be that I've done this faithfully. Same thing for him. As a padre, I have lots of opinions about things that happen in his work. And lots of times I disagree with how he's handled things, the same as he does with me. But in the end, he's the one who knows his context, he knows his people, he knows all the things I don't know. He makes a decision. And if it's a great decision, awesome. If it's not a great decision, he deals with the consequences. Same with me. But people have to submit to his leadership as their leader. Well, as Christians, there is something else we have to consider, and that is the fact that we have to submit to the leadership of the Holy Spirit. And submission is a hard word for a lot of people these days. Who, the H-E double hockey sticks, do you think you are telling me what to do? Well, if I am your manager at work and I'm the one who authorizes your paycheck, and you don't show up at work and then I authorize them not to pay you, I have the leadership over you. You are to submit. Your role of submitting is to show up for work and do a good job. It's pretty straightforward. If you don't come to work, you don't get paid. That's the consequence of not submitting to my leadership. And again, I'm thinking about the world we're living in, the young people that we are raising up. And are we teaching them in the way that we live our lives, both professionally, the lives we set for ourselves at home, the way we raise our children, the way we exhibit how we live our lives at church in faith contexts? Are we teaching people the importance of being submissive? Now, submissive does not mean lay down and grovel or be treated like a servant or a slave. Submissive means that we go to the person who has authority over us in this context, and we do as they ask. If I had said to my 4-year-old stepson, Dan, I am telling you we had a very long driveway. I am telling you not to run ahead of me when we are going for a walk. The reason I'm telling him that is because at the end of our long driveway is a very busy road. And if he doesn't stop and wait for me, he could dart out in front of a car. So I needed him to submit to my role as the leader in this case for his own sake. Now, do I tell him why? Absolutely. Education is a huge part of being a leader, of explaining to somebody, this is why it's important that you listen to what I'm saying to you, that you follow my direction. But there are times, like if we're going to dart into the street and I yelled, stop. Absolutely. I do not need in that moment to take the time to explain myself. He just needs to submit. And later on, we can come back and go over that. It's all context. And I think these days in the church, I'm wondering if we're not doing a good enough job of recognizing who it is that we are called to submit to. We are called to submit to the leadership of God. And in my way of thinking, my way of living out my faith is that the way that we listen to God, the way that God speaks to us in the everyday, is through the Holy Spirit. Through the Holy Spirit, the ways that God speaks to us audibly, by that gut feeling, I don't know, the hunch we have, the coincidences that just seem to happen. Holy Spirit. When we submit ourselves to the leadership of the Holy Spirit, we will find ourselves walking in the path that God would have us walk. Think about all the leaders in the Bible. They submitted themselves. Peter, all the disciples, Simeon and Anna in the presentation of Jesus in the temple, Joseph and Mary, like submitting themselves to the leadership of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit said, you know what, right now's the time to do this thing. And they said yes. Did they always understand why? Nope. But they knew they could trust the Holy Spirit, and so they listened and they followed where the Spirit was leading them to go. And it all worked out beautifully. We need, I think, to come back to a world where we recognize the true understanding of what it is to be submissive, not to be a doormat. That also means that the people who we are submitting to are worthy of that. A man, a husband who is worthy of the role of leader in his family, or a mom, like if that's the way this works, a leader who is taking the role in that moment of leadership in the family is one who will not ever treat the people who are with them like doormats. They will treat them like they are queens and princesses and princes, because that is how Christ treats us. And that is how someone who loves us and who has responsibility for us, or who walks in leadership with us, treats us with respect and dignity. But I think we really need to get that. We need to really understand what it means to submit to the leadership of the Holy Spirit. Because maybe if we start there, we can start to help the rest of the world figure out the ways that submitting to leadership is helpful, like showing up for work and expecting a paycheck, because there's a lot of that going around in the world where people just like, yeah, I'm not going to bother going. Like going to school. I'm just not going to bother going to school today. Yeah, that didn't happen when I was growing up, not very much. But I think we need to get back into a world where we acknowledge that we need leadership, all of us. Even kings and presidents and prime ministers need someone to follow, whether that be previous people who did a good job or God. We all need to look up to someone to whom we can submit. And as Christians, we have the best leader of all, the Holy Spirit. Just some stuff to think about. Have a great day, and God bless.